it's Lon.TV with another Android television device to take a look at. This time we're taking a look at the Biggifi, and this is from the folks at Biggifi. They sent it to the show to review. And what this is essentially a Chromecast size Android device. It's got a Cortex A9 processor with an ARM Mali 400 GPU. It's running 4.2 of Android, so it's a little bit behind. It's not quite up to Kit Kat, so it's kind of in the middle there. I think maybe that's Ice Cream Sandwich or some older version of Android. It's got a gigabyte of onboard RAM. It only has 4 gigabytes of onboard flash, and you'll see in a minute that's going to be a bit of a problem, especially for apps that require some internal storage to work. So there's some limit to what you can do with it there. It does have an SD card slot on the side. I've got a 32 gig card in here, and that's working just fine. HDMI connector, of course, and you can plug this directly into your television if you so choose. And you can also, of course, run it through other equipment like I'm doing right now with the included extender cable. It also has a USB port on the front here, so you can plug in other peripherals. One thing it doesn't have, though, is Bluetooth. So while it does have Wi-Fi, and I'm going to show you how you control it in a minute with your phone, it does not have Bluetooth on board. So if you're trying to hook up a game controller or something like that, you're probably going to be out of luck there. It has Wi-Fi 802.11, BG, and N, and it does say you can actually support 4 users plugging in their phones simultaneously to the device. So if you have a 4-player mobile game, you can play with it there. So let's dive into this and see what it's all about. All right, our Biggifi is booted, and you're probably wondering how you control it. It does not come with a remote control or a keyboard or anything else like that, but what they do give you on the iPhone and the Android App Store is an app to control it. And I've got it booted up here. It looks on the network to find your Biggifi. It actually configures itself very similar to a Chromecast, where you have to connect to the device first and then get to work in using it. Now, there's 2 modes that you can use. The first is called mouse mode. So as you can see, I'm dragging my finger around here, and there's a mouse cursor that follows it. And that basically lets me kind of just tap on the thing that I want to load. So I can tap on YouTube here and hopefully load that up, and there it is. And what's nice is that when you are viewing things like video, it will run them in full screen. So if I click on the Tonight Show here, I am not watching that 50 Shades of Grey trailer. You can hit the play button here, and when it goes full screen, it will get rid of the little bar at the bottom here. So if I go over to here and hit the full screen, it will get rid of that. And what they've kind of decided here with this, because I've seen a lot of attempts at some of these Android set-top boxes, is they've decided to try not to reinvent the wheel and create their own interface. You're basically using this like you would a touch-based device with your phone. And what they have is a second mode as well. So if you wanted to maybe do an on-screen game controller or something where you needed more precision, you can switch it into touchscreen mode, where wherever you touch on the screen will be translated out onto the television, essentially. And you kind of have to know where your finger is going to go in order to do that. So what they've added is a little feature here where you can hit this button here, and what it's going to do is actually drop in a screenshot which will transmit to the app, so I know where to push if I want something to happen. So if I wanted to go over to the autos thing here, I can just tap on the autos on my screen, and it will obviously translate properly there. Now if I scroll the screen down here a little bit, it will change the orientation on the screen, and I've got to take another screenshot to get that over here in order to find what I'm clicking on. But it is kind of a neat approach for making this work. Now, this also works with games that support motion sensing as well, and they have like an app store where there's some recommendations for downloading apps that support this. It's not the best game playing device in the world. You'll see in a minute it does, can handle some of the older retro games pretty well, but I don't know if it's going to keep up with some of these Tegra-based things that we're seeing. It's probably not as powerful as the Ouya either. So I would say, don't get your gaming hopes up, but it will certainly do some games. So let's go in here and find that driving game that they were telling me about. Fast Racing, I think, is the one, and we'll let this load up. And one of the issues that you're going to run into on this is that for things that don't support full screen, you're going to see this band on the bottom, and this is going to show up in a lot of places. It shows up on XBMC. It shows up in a whole bunch of different places that you don't want it to show up in. I guess you could probably try to root the device and get rid of that, but unfortunately that's something you're going to have to deal with. Now you can see here I'm tapping and I'm not getting anything, so I've got to switch it into my finger pointing mode, take the screenshot so I know where I'm pointing, and then tap on Quick Race. And this is one of the issues here, is that you kind of have to sometimes fight with the interface because these games are not really designed for this device. They're designed for touchscreens. and you just have to kind of poke around and maybe take some screenshots every once in a while. What I was amazed with, though, or maybe just impressed with, was the fact that the latency is very low between the device and the screen, and it works very well for these motion games where you can have a little bit of give on the latency as well. So let's get through this little opening scene here and just get to our driving. And the graphics aren't spectacular here. Let me switch over onto our scaler screen for a second so you can just see how it does with graphics here. It's okay. I mean, there are certainly other games that you can try to run on it. The problem is that there is not a lot of onboard storage, so you have a limit as to what you can actually do. But as you can see, I'm driving very terribly here, but you can move your phone here and it'll translate the motion onto the screen. And it's hard to see just through this video, but the latency is actually pretty good and it's actually playable. So I think their claims that this is a good way to play some of these motion driving games is probably a correct claim in that it does seem to work. Now on the end of the device there is a USB port and you can plug stuff into it. So what I've got here is a USB hub actually with Ethernet. I'm going to plug this in and just see what happens. We've got a keyboard and a real keyboard and a mouse attached. So if we plug this in, let's see what we get. And we should get a little Ethernet warning about the fact that we don't have anything plugged in. Yep, here we go, and it's asking us to type in an IP address. Now I want to show you something too, because on the app, whenever the Android keyboard pops up, the app will pop up a on-screen keyboard as well that you can use to type on. And what you have to do though is type things in and then send them. So if you have to switch fields, you've got to send the text over to the screen, close the keyboard, move your finger around, and then select the next one. So if you can get like a wireless keyboard or something, or a wired keyboard, that might work. But the fact is you can use a hub through this. And what we're going to do next is plug in our classic game controller here with USB and see how we can do on retro gaming. So let's plug this in. All right, we've got our game controller connected and our screen is running here with Super Mario Bros. 3 on one of the emulators. And as you can see, we're able to game with our USB pad and get everything working properly. It's a bit of a disappointment that you don't have the Bluetooth option, so you can't plug in a Bluetooth controller, but you can, of course, play with wired ones. And because I know a lot of you are going to ask, yes, it can run a Nintendo 64 emulator. It's just going to be a little crazy to control it without my Nintendo 64 controller on board. But as you can see here, we've got it running here, and I can kind of work it. Again, the touch controls work better than I thought they would. But what happens is, especially when you have really fine movements here, it gets a little hard to find the buttons in the right spot because they are so tiny on the screen. But once you do get them in there, you can run around pretty well. It's not perfect, as you can see. It's got a lot of graphical glitches. I'm not sure if this is more the emulator's fault than it is the device, but it seems to do okay. It's about on par with kind of a middle-of-the-road Android device. Now, one area of concern, especially probably to gamers, is the fact that there isn't a lot of onboard storage. So as you can see down here, we have 607 megs used on the internal device, but only 889 megabytes available. So a lot of the larger games that may require internal memory may not like this device at all. In fact, Asphalt 8 is a great example. It keeps asking for an additional 400 megs in addition to what we already have, even though I installed it on the SD card. So maybe future versions of Android might be a little bit more forgiving, but that lack of internal storage might be a limitation for some. Now, I was able to get XBMC installed, but that taskbar at the bottom never goes away. And I also had a very hard time getting it to spin up some of those Blu-ray MKVs that I like to test on all these devices to see if they can play. I couldn't even get it to start playing. So I think it'll do smaller MP4 files and that sort of thing, but large 1080p videos are probably going to be out of the question. So that is the Biggifi, and I've been really scratching my head trying to figure out who this is for, because this is not a set-top box replacement. It's really not easy to navigate all the different media applications on here. As you saw with that YouTube demo, you've got to kind of poke around your phone, find the video you want to play, and when it does start playing, you've got to drag around and click on the full screen icon to get it onto your television. There's certainly easier ways to play back YouTube content. There's great clients on the Roku, on the Ouya, on the Amazon Fire TV. So, as a media playing device, it's probably not there. Where I think it is interesting is that it's a very inexpensive little Android mini computer that you can plug into your television. And the reason is that USB port on here is very useful in that you can connect multiple devices using a hub like we demonstrated and be able to maybe get a little cheap computer that your kids can play with that has some kind of an interface around it that's a little bit easier to use maybe than a Raspberry Pi or something like that. So I like what they've done with the interface. I think the app approach and how they approach using the app to control the Biggifi with the phone is very clever. It's not, the latency isn't as bad as I thought it would be, and so those are all good things, but it's a little bit limited in its lack of Bluetooth, its lack of memory, and I think there's some things they could do to improve this that might make it more interesting, but at this point I think it's got a very narrow kind of audience. This is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.